Recorded.
To raise awareness of a problem or for groups and individuals to develop and implement their own solutions. It's about supporting networks of individuals and groups and strengthening them to encourage neighborliness, so caring and assisting for neighbors in need, and just generally sort of uniting with each other to have a better quality of life. It's about the resilience of individuals and groups towards difficult situations and building that up. It's about confidence and skills to identify, develop, and implement and sustain their own solutions. It's about a community's autonomy to come up with a solution or to inform, assist and pressure local governments and local businesses. The aggregate of all of these can be described as a capacity to handle local, social, environmental, and economic issues. So what ideally will result is a cohesive and inclusive self-supported community that can problem solve well and influence the different stakeholders and together create better development and a better future. So I'm going to go through some examples of what community capacity building can look like. I'm based in Brixton and have been for the past 4 years of living in the UK, and the sort of things I've seen are on my local level, concepts like projects like the Open Project Night. So one of the impact hubs, the Brixton Impact Hub, used to be based in the town hall, and they had an event called Open Project Night every Monday after the co-working space was closed to members in the evening from 6 o'clock. It was opened up for the general public to come in and use that space. So people could use that space for to present an idea for a community project of some sort and to work on that project in this space each week. So general people from the general public could also just show up and hop on to help out on someone else's projects. They could jump between different projects on the same night, or they could come in just for the one-off occasion, or they could attend every week to contribute. So that was a great initiative that brought out some amazing projects like the community fridge. There's a scope for different art initiatives and all kinds of things really. So it's a great way to develop community capacity. Another example would be the Brixton Bid and Lambeth College teaming up to offer free first aid training, food hygiene, customer service, personal licensing, and other certification, which allows individuals to get work, to upskill them, to allow for more opportunities. It also enabled community groups to run their own events, which would ordinarily require the paid service of people with these certifications and sort of better able them to run their own events on tight resources. Pop Brixton, which is around the corner as well, so they offered free martial arts for kids, free Tai Chi, and free yoga for mums as well. So that's an example of a more private group trying to contribute in some form. However, today I will focus on community capacity building specifically through green space and planting, and the main focus will be on the neighborhood scale as opposed to individual and the metropolitan level. So here we have an overview of some planting and green space initiatives that can help build community capacity at each of the 3 levels. We can see that with each type of activity, there's a clear difference in the number of participants as well as the catchment area that each activity pulls people in from. Each one can feed into various activities in the level above or below. Investing in either layer is likely to stimulate or strengthen activities at the other scales. So I think people will be familiar with most of these concepts or ideas. GP Food Co-op, I believe the concept behind that is is where patients would be prescribed to have gardening time, and so these food grow initiatives would sort of help act as therapy for individuals. What I mean by organizations and networks, there's various organizations which try to allow the different growing projects in a council, for example, or constituency, and they run events where different groups can meet each other, share resources and knowledge. That's what I mean by that. I think most people will be familiar with city farms and various harvest festivals, or even markets as well, where you can get the local produce. So we'll get on to the individual scale. So planting in green space is beneficial on various levels, and whether it's from the individual level or the larger population. The various ways to achieve community capacity building, community capacity through planting green space. However, on the individual scale, it's really about getting the individual to be at a state where they're ready to contribute. The way that the organization I was working with for the past 4 years achieved this is to help give an individual access to the 5 ways of well-being through the sites that we acquire, develop, or enhance. So by creating opportunities for people to take notice, which is a form of presencing, to connect to other people, to give time and attention to a community project, or to help someone else, to be active and physically active, as well as to learn whether something that's usually outside the scope of an individual's every day. What this all leads to is a better state of mind, better physical health and emotional state, and it also cultivates kindness as well. So this sets an individual up to be more resilient and better able and willing to participate in their community. So looking at some tools to address this. In London, for example, there's less than 58% of us have access to private garden space. Allotments are one solution to address the lack of green space and access to these 5 ways of well-being. However, access is quite limited. In London, for example, in Camden, there's a waiting list for an allotment as long as 40 years. There are up to 90,000 people waiting for space on the 300,000 council-run allotments that currently exist in the UK. And the NHS do prescribe appointments for people to do gardening activities, and it is estimated that 900,000 people will be prescribed to do so in the next 5 years. I'm not sure how that's going to change with the current crisis, but that was where it stood before. And so various private sector models are popping out to address allotment specifically. I know of an organization called AllotMe, started up by an architect who decided to pursue this challenge, and it's about creating self-funding allotments on unused spaces, a bit like an Airbnb for allotments. And so other examples would be just individuals taking on food growing at home, sharing their knowledge with their neighbors, people having houseplants at home, or just using food scraps and growing from food scraps, whether it's an avocado seed, or just having chilies or herbs on your windowsill. These are all planting and gardening activities which do help achieve this first stage to allow you to then take part in the community. So the focus of today will be more around this neighborhood scale. So this is the sort of bread and butter of what I was doing for the past few years. And so it's about creating community gardens on housing estates. the areas we focused on over the past few years would be, we got a message there. We mainly operated in South London, but did venture out to other areas as well. And so we found that through creating these gardens on quite tarmac or hard surfaced housing estate shared spaces, it significantly impacts on creating community capacity and building up the resilience and all the different factors which contributed to that. And in particular, edible gardens seem to make the biggest impact. So the process usually started with initial interest or pressure coming in from the residents. Usually there's a key active resident who leads the initiative. They sometimes sit on the TRA or lead the TRA, and they start to discuss with a housing officer or the regeneration team. And what then happens is those council representatives, if they have the funding available, do put out a tender to local organisations. So what we notice is we would pitch for this opportunity, and the way we differ to other organisations is that we try to design a space which, first of all, had food growing, but also involved the community throughout the different stages of it. In some cases, the community would come up with the designs. In each case, we encourage people to join us to actually build, as well as do the planting, and then we did offer the option for workshops afterwards as well. While a lot of the other companies pitching tended to be garden maintenance companies who sort of propose some sort of ornamental feature, which would be built and just left for the residents to have. The funding most often came from Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy. So basically, when there's development in a local area, a proportion of the value of the overall site would have to be paid to the local council to then invest in the local community for various things. It could be for better transport resources to sustain the new development. It could be to offset negative impacts from the new developments, or a number of different things. And what we learned quite recently is that if that funding is not used within 2 years, the developer or construction company can actually request for it back. And over the past 10 years or so, there's a news article saying that quite a lot of the funds that were paid for the Section 106 and CIL were actually given back. And it is amazing that, you know, it can go 2 years without it being used up when there's such high need for it. In other cases, residents pool their funds together and ask the council to then find someone to come in and set up a garden. So in this particular case, we did a mix of ornamental and edible beds. I think it was 60 to 80 square meters of raised beds that we set up. So on areas like in this example, estates like this often have taps in the sort of square, as you can see here. Often, if there's not one directly outside, they can be found in bin stores. So there was a bin store at the to the right of to the bottom left of the picture at the top. Sorry, to the bottom right of the picture at the top, and also another one at the top left corner behind that building through a hallway. So we try to limit. We try to require that a site has water access before we do build a garden on it, because otherwise it's not sustainable in the long summers we had recently. And in this case, we had the irrigation system installed to the outside tap, and then I put in a series of hosing to go through a hallway and then out again into the garden space you can see here. So it's quite amazing the short-term results. So during the build, the neighbours joined in. I believe the council would have adopted the costs for the water. So short-term results. During these builds, the neighbours would join in, meet each other, and get to know each other better, because just people get curious, and neighbours from other states also get curious as they walk by and ask what's going on here. Children want to have a peek as well and pop around, especially when the plants arrive and all the colours arrive. As soon as the plants get dropped off, bees somehow find us and already start to explore the new plants. And after completion, people walking by on their commutes or just doing their day-to-day activities stop and compliment the space, start conversations. Neighbours from slightly further come and see the garden, start to spend time here as well. What we found is that the residents assist to facilitate gardening sessions, especially with children, teaching them to learn where food comes from. New residents come and can join in the gardening activities as well. Older residents share their gardening knowledge, their food growing knowledge and the plant knowledge with neighbours and the younger generation as well. So it does have quite a lot of the social benefits, and it does also encourage the more quiet residents to come out as well. It's a lot easier to sort of socialize if you are shy while doing another activity, especially if you might be good at it or have some knowledge around it. So this can be particularly effective in cross-cultural relationships as well. So during my time now studying overseas in Australia, there were edible gardens, raised beds installed on housing estates over there. A lot of them would be occupied by refugees. So what people found is that it led to a lot of seed swapping, swapping of plants and produce as well, and it brought many people together. So within the refugee community in particular, when they were suddenly in this completely new culture and environment and geography, just seeing a plant which they're familiar with, made their eyes light up, made them open up a lot more. It's amazing to hear those stories, and people start to connect. When there's a good story of someone trading a tomato plant with someone else for another plant, and they nurture that gift, and just as they nurture their new relationship as well. So it's very beneficial. And many groups, many different cultural groups use the same produce, use the same food and ingredients, but in very different ways. So people do share recipes and share dishes with each other as well. So the long-term results, when we see people, put pressure on their TRA, who then put pressure on their housing officers or the region team, or if they're all in agreement as to what the benefits of this a project like this could be and want to have it done, the long-term result is that the individual, the neighbours on the estates, the TRA, and the housing officers themselves, they gain confidence to work together. They support each other and start improving the aspects of the community life. I'll go through another example not far from this location here on this site here is Caldwell Gardens on it's off Brixton Road. It's near the Van Gogh Cafe. The next location is here, Melbourne Mews, which is off Normandy Road, I believe. So this was slightly different because the residents grouped together, and I think, actually no, it wasn't this one. Another location, sort of opposite the Imperial War Museum, the residents pulled their funds together have us replant, so to clean up and replant existing beds and add to raised beds for edible food growing as well. So this one here, the main idea was to, the residents had their own design and really wanted these two large raised beds to prevent illegal parking. So what they found was a lot of commuters would come in and park here illegally, and then take the buses or Brixton and Stockwell to work. And there was also an issue of fly tipping as well. So they presented their design, contacted the council, who then linked us in, and so we came in and built these raised beds, put in a growing media, and brought in some plants as well. The residents brought a lot of their own plants from their own gardens, and you can see that there's quite a diverse mix of age and cultures there. And the lead resident, Mary, over here, she was sort of the one who rallied everyone together around this. So after this win, this achievement, having the two gardens, so the two raised beds, the residents then went on to pressure the council to get the traffic legislation. Well, first of all, get the enforcement officer, the traffic wardens, to better patrol and penalize people who were parking legally, and then they got in more signage as well to show the parking requirements. And I think you can see the orange barrier at the front. So a car had knocked down one of the bollards over there, and the bed was successful in also stopping cars from rushing around the corner, and they did nick the corner on the bed a couple of times, but as far as I know, they're planning to put in a new bollard there, and the residents are trying to then get more planting done in the further down the drive of this very tarmacked over car orientated space. So as you can see, it's reclaimed space from vehicles and giving it back to people as well. So key learnings around this level. So it's really about finding the active residents, the natural leaders, and it must be done in a way which involves residents in the build and planting. That instills a sense of ownership and stewardship for the residents, and it just means the beds will be taken care of a lot better. This particular project didn't have a water source nearby, so Mary and the residents did an amazing job of using a wheelbarrow with a water sack. There's a sort of like a giant plastic, like a hot water bottle that could be filled up, and then you lift up the wheelbarrow to pour the water out the spout into the garden beds. So the key is maintaining momentum as well after the build, because we had access to other funding, or projects. Well, what's the best way to describe it? We were able to use, I think it was Prince's Trust or Edible Living funding to return to these sites monthly or maybe twice a month to run workshops for the residents to teach them how to grow food if they didn't know already, or teach them new skills. There's an amazing greenhouse in Myatt's Fields which uses grant funding to purchase thousands of seeds and then to grow them to seedling stage. And then these get distributed around to community projects or estates within certain radius. And so we would bring those to the sites, and each year sort of inject a bit of life and new plants into these projects we return to. We found that taking a lot of photos was essential as well, capturing the memories and the moments during the build. It also just adds to being able to develop the case study, and once you have have that story and empirical support, it's that you're better able to spread it around and to convince people that this is important and it works. So it does show the local government that communities and neighbours can have autonomy. They have the capacity to organise and help and support. And when we have a lot of residents join in, it significantly reduces the labour costs as well. If we knew that we could get a certain amount of residents, it means we could be on site for a half day or a day less, which means we can reduce the overall cost of the project as well for the council or the residents. So that was the key. So what we found as well, participants, the residents started to better trust the local government as well, and the local government also started to trust the residents when they saw that these spaces were taken care of, and when residents saw that they were being heard and taken seriously as well. So that was a good sign to see. So looking at the sort of local council constituency level or the metropolitan level, the goals changed slightly. It's more about building on the existing projects or doing something which can only be done at this scale. So the city farms are a good example where you have, when I first moved back to UK and went into Vauxhall, it was quite strange seeing alpacas and MI6 in the background there, just in the same photo. It's quite unusual to see just animals in the middle of a city like this, and being able to have that connection for children who grow up in cities. I grew up in cities a lot of my life, and yeah, it's an opportunity like going to City Farm would be the way to learn, really. So the idea is to create sort of services and support systems for the existing projects, community gardening and gardens and services. So I mentioned the community greenhouse in Wrightsfields. There's a photo of it there where people are joining in to sow seeds and take care of the young seedlings. And once they're more mature, they get distributed out. Community orchards are another example, which have a bigger reach than just a housing estate garden. We do find that people come in from different parts of London, or even while they're on holiday to the UK, if they hear about a particular orchard, they do come and visit. Creating the networks I mentioned before. So incredible edible movements exist around the UK, and so Incredible Edible Lambeth, for example, will put all of the local food growing and community garden initiatives onto a map, so that people can know who's out there and contact each other, share knowledge and share skills. Capital Growth does a similar thing at the national scale, and what they do is they help fund and facilitate events. They host meetup networking events. They'll offer workshops, paid workshops where different members of the network can run their own sessions, and people turn up and take away skills and knowledge to apply to their own space. Chelsea Fringe Festival is sort of a more accessible and widespread version of the Chelsea Flower Show. So a few of our sites would feature on that. And the Big Dig, I think it's in April each year, where everyone sort of sets up or goes to their nearby gardening activity for the day. And it's just sort of trying to keep this movement alive around being outside and planting, growing, and being connected to nature. So at this scale, it's about engaging people perhaps for the first time, sparking their interest in planting and gardening, and encourages people to then find their local community gardens or orchards or whatever it may be. And it also inspires people to do their own thing at home as well. So it's quite interesting to see how the different scales, the interventions at different scales have slightly different purposes, but sort of is part of the bigger ecosystem. So the project that we did over the past few years, which sort of fits at the scale, is the Brixton Orchard. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with that, but the Brixton Business Improvement District conducted an environmental assessment audit, which identified this location at the top photo as just an empty, neglected bit of land. Cars would drive into there, and well, some people would just dump their car there. They started to desire lines started to form diagonally across. So where from the bottom left of the top photo across to the right of where that bus is, where the other gate and the other entrance is, people will cut through to get to the other side from Brixton Hill to Ephra. So once they identified this site, they came up with ideas on how they could rejuvenate this space and turn it into a community space. They decided they wanted to use it to address clean air, biodiversity, and food growing as well. So an orchard was proposed for this space. They then got in touch with the organization I was working for, Urban Growth, along with Open Orchard, another local initiative or small, I believe it's a charity or non-profit organization. And so we looked at how we could set the space up. So the first stage was to prepare the land. So we involved a lot of community members, a lot of neighbors. We invited them in to help us prepare the space, to remove what needed to be removed, to dig the holes ready for the trees to go in. We then planted all the fruit trees. I think there's 35 fruit trees in total. And so it's nice that someone, a local resident or even a visitor coming into Brixton, can have left their mark, planted a tree which they can come back to visit for the next few decades. The next stage was to create these tree guards, because sadly a lot of people train their dogs for fighting by attacking trees and stripping the trees. So we put these sweet chestnut timber guards around each one. We then put in some planting around it to encourage biodiversity. And as you can see by the third photo, how lush it all became compared to the first photo. You can see the cardoons related to artichoke on the left-hand side and the right-hand side. This one's a slightly less colourful picture because of the time of year, but I've been shielding for the past 5 months actually, so I haven't seen how it's looked quite recently. But you can see in the last photo there's a bunch of cherries. There's 10 cherry trees in the centre, and then a mulberry right in the middle of that, and then a mix of apple, pears, quince, plums, damsons as well. So what then happened? So we finished planting the trees, and the source of funding was through a Clean Air Better Business initiative. There's partnership with Cross River Partnership, Clean Air Better Business, I think it's called as well. And then Mayor of London also match funded the project. So that funding went for 2 years, I believe. And then after that, the bid had to use their own funding based on the levies they have from local businesses. So there's sort of some scaled back set up from when the original funding finished up. What we then, so when we had a scale back in the funding, What we then looked into was sourcing resources from other areas. So we were able to get free wood chip from the Lambeth arboriculturalist, the tree surgeon who would be servicing trees along Rush Common. He would pop down if we were on site and say, look, we were just tending to a tree over here and we have all this wood chip. Would you like me to just quickly drop it around the corner onto your space? So we very much appreciated that and use that to feed and take care of the trees and make the area look tidy as well. What we were able to do is because the awareness around the space picked up quite a bit, we're able to get in Santander and I think it's called QBE and a few other organizations who would come in and do a corporate outreach day, like a CSR day. And so Santander would come in with a £250 budget and 10 to 15 people. So we'd use that to buy 100 or so plants to plant into the space. And we did that 2 to 3 times a year with various groups from Santander, and then at other times with the other organizations as well. So that started to become a sustainable project, which didn't solely rely on the bids funding. So yeah, we did run free workshops for the public each week, and people would join in. When we couldn't water the site during the 6 weeks of no rain, we were amazed to see that residents had come down to water the garden, the trees for us, because they do require 5 minutes per tree each week. So we found that some residents found it quite therapeutic. They would come down from Brixton Hill area, Helix and Josephine Avenue area, because it made them get out of the house and be active when they otherwise wouldn't be. We found that a lot of people came in for our workshops like fruit tree grafting, winter pruning and summer pruning as well. They're particularly interested in those skills, which used to be much more widespread knowledge in the UK, and people reconnected with that. And people would then share that knowledge with their own groups as well. It created sort of some neighbourhood pride as well. A lot of residents also came to speak to us about their own ideas and initiatives, and they were inspired to set up similar things in Clapham and other places that they're looking into doing as well. So we're quite happy to see that. So just to summarise, at the individual level, it's more about getting someone into a physical and mental and emotional state to then be willing and able to contribute to their local community. At the neighbourhood scale, it's about giving people permission and belief and the skills and confidence to organise with each other to address an issue or problem, or identify one in the first place, address it, and implement and sustain a solution. The local council or metropolitan scale, it's about showing more symbolic projects or projects which act to support the initiatives at other scales, to better invite people to understand what the movements are about, to then find their own communities projects. And if we look at the different roles stakeholders could play, local councils can better shoulder tap individuals or communities to set up certain projects. They can better equip their TRAs. They can choose local community gardening organizations over garden maintenance companies. They can target areas on estates that are just amenity lawn, just grass, which doesn't really contribute much in terms of biodiversity. Doing so may make estates a lot more safe and social as well. It's about placemaking, identifying dead space and rejuvenating it. Local businesses can create shared spaces, community spaces. They can offer up their office space, which is unused for a good portion of the day, like from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock even. You can offer workshops and learning for local communities as well, and yeah, offering meeting space for communities when not in use is probably the key one. Large organizations like we saw Santander offering their corporate days, that really does help as well. So that's sort of a quick overview into all of the initiatives that I've come across over the past few years. I know that's a lot of information to have sort of chucked onto everyone, but yeah, I'm happy to discuss in more detail now on other questions you may have.
Thank you very, very much, Sebastian, for sharing that insightful presentation. There was so much content covered there. I was writing quite copious notes. Okay, we're going to open the floor now for your questions. I know that Eileen has already asked a couple, so I'm just going to follow up on her questions. Sebastian, she was asking initially about irrigation, so watering in the context of the small one. You did address the hosing segment of that, but I know when we were talking about it, we were discussing irrigation on more regular. So if you wanted to share a little bit more about that, particularly with regards to the planting choices, that might be useful.
Sure. So where we knew there was no possibility of having any water access, and especially it would be about, it's probably about focusing on ornamental plants as opposed to edible, or ones which we basically would plant Mediterranean style planting. So you could still have some of those which are edible, but the key thing is they would be drought tolerant. They wouldn't need a high degree of nutrition in the soil, and they could handle less care. So we would plant a lot more lavender, rosemary, thyme, and so on, and then a lot of the related more ornamental varieties. In some cases, the residents groups would gathered some funds up themselves to get a plumber in to install an additional tap. So when the rest of the project was funded by these Section 106 or CIL through the government, I think in that particular case they did ask the council for to help put in a tap, but that was taking too long, so they took it upon themselves to do it. Yeah, we do have we do strongly recommend that the gardens are built in places which have strong taps, existing water access, and yeah. So, sorry, do you want to present the questions, or do I read them from the chat? What's the best way?
I can tell you her next one. At the moment, okay. It's just Eileen who's asked a question. What she was asking about the second one was maintaining community involvement. So with the example you gave with the pot, with the same host plant, there he is. So now you can see him, Eileen. Hopefully you're happier. She wanted to know, like you mentioned, Mary, the lady wearing the red T-shirt. So she wanted to know what happens if the lead person suddenly becomes less active. I know when we were talking about it, explained about people sort of taking cuttings from their own gardens and
yeah, I think
being invested.
Mm-hmm. If we return to the site regularly, what happens is you have this continuation of momentum, and we're better able to assist with succession planning in some form. But I think the nature of it is that if people care, the people who care that much will often try to pass it and hand it over to other people. But there is always a risk that if the key driver behind the project leaves, that it doesn't continue. I think on the gardens that we've done, like in the photos there, we didn't find that happen. People went on to keep growing and actually win awards like a Lambeth Blooming Lambeth Award for their food growing. I think that's why it's about creating that foundation as well as you can, because that way it's just going to guarantee much that it will succeed much more so than if you sort of leave it people to their own devices too early on.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We have a question coming through. This one is from Mark. Mark is asking if you were involved in creating places for residents to linger by providing seating in the projects, and if so, what types?
So in the first example, so the Coldwell Gardens example, we built the raised beds three railway sleepers high, and so we'd often keep at 3 sleepers high. It was about 60 centimeters, so they acted to work as a seat themselves. But we would also, in other instances, place another layer of railway sleeper on sort of flat, which acts as a seat. And so we designed it often the raised beds to be comfortable seating themselves. In other areas, I think we looked at bringing in other timber seating as well. But I think it's about trying to have people interact with raised beds in most instances. So the best option if fundings were allowing for it, we would put the 2 railway sleepers vertically and the top one horizontally, or three vertically and then the 4th one horizontal, making a 50 centimeter high seat on the edges of the beds themselves.
Okay, we have another question from Mark. He's asking about issues with vandalism, and if you have encountered vandalism, how have you actually addressed or tried to counter or deal with that?
I think we were most concerned that vandalism would be an issue in the Brixton Orchard because it's so public. It wasn't really protected within an estate, and in order to prevent that, the best thing is to involve as much of the local people in the early stages. First of all, the decision to pursue the project at all, the design, the build and planting as well. But I think it depends. Whenever you bring something new and airdrop it into a community, that can run risks. If it's a project which is a sign of gentrification in an area which has been hurt by gentrification, for example, that's going to set up for the potential for vandalism. But I think, as a positive note, planting more so than maybe another intervention of project has a more calming effect on people, and people are slightly less likely to vandalize. But yeah, it is still a concern. Graffiti can be an issue in some respects if you do leave blank areas of fencing or walls as well, and we just have to take that into account.
Thank you. We have one last question from Aya. She's asking, how with the edible garden projects, do you tend to plant low maintenance plants, and how do you go about selecting the plant species?
Very much about looking at each individual site and what the aspect is. So where does the sun rise? Where does the sun set? Are there any trees blocking? Are there any buildings blocking space? And are there microclimates? Does this wall create a warmer area? Usually the northeast corner, which is the hottest, for example. And then is it south facing? So we have, and is it on a slope? So we have to base those decisions on what's most suitable horticulturally, and what the soil type is. Maybe we do try and sort of prepare the soil to accommodate what the residents would like and plant what they would like, but you have to get that balance. If it was really low maintenance, we would put something like Trachycarpus, which I think looks a bit like a palm, And if that's just going to be on a street side to prevent fly tipping in a cul-de-sac, so it's not really linked to a particular group of residents, then we would plant in that way, where it's just very low maintenance, drought-tolerant plants.
Excellent. I don't know if we can squeeze in one last question from Deborah. Deborah is asking how to keep momentum going and keep people engaged, especially with autumn and winter coming up.
Sure. So the orchard was great because you had activities to do throughout the year. You had your winter pruning and the tree washing to prevent pests. You had your spring graft, your grafting in the winter, well, late winter, early spring, and then your slightly later grafting. You had your summer pruning, and then you had your harvest from summer through to autumn. If you plant correctly, you can have color and seasonal interest in each season. You can have food which you can harvest as well throughout the year, like salads you can grow throughout the year. If you are to cover a raised bed with a protective tunnel or fleece, plants won't just stop and just stay completely still for those months. They could actually continue to grow. So, but the key is probably linking in workshops if you can, or if it's not on that particular site, if you have people go into the existing networks to attend indoor workshops and other sessions that happen in autumn, winter, and so on, it does sustain the momentum. Also, during the non-growing or the less growing season, it's about doing the maintenance, the repairing of beds or installing of new ones to set up for the growing season as well. So I think it's just about planning ahead and keeping people's interest through other means, whether it's learning, whether it's through exploring other people's work, or doing the sort of more hands-off side activities as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sebastian. That's been really insightful. Can I just ask you to put up our last slide, and then I can give a shameless plug for our next event and formally thank you again.
Cool.
Well, folks, I think you will join me in agreeing that this was really insightful. Lots of really useful suggestions, wealth of experience. I've had the benefit of talking to Sebastian about some of these issues, and he's talked about a number of different benefits, including social benefits, health benefits, mitigating the urban heat island effects, reducing the flooding, as well as ensuring that people feel welcome, people feel at home and at ease, and facilitating those opportunities to make more social connections and interactions. So there's loads of benefits to the type of work that he's doing and has been doing and has experience in. For those of you who are interested, please feel free to get in touch, and I can try and connect you to Sebastian so that you can follow up with him directly with his permission if you have further questions. I'd also like to draw your attention to our next event, next Creative Community Placemakers event next month. That is going to be on Friday, the 25th of September at 3 p.m. So we're changing the time for this event, and that's going to be on reimagining Brixton to retain Afro-Caribbean culture during gentrification, and that's going to be facilitated by Joanna Fenning. It's a theoretical discussion on what gentrification in Brixton might look like if aspects of Afro-Caribbean culture and heritage were retained. So Joanna will be looking specifically at the arches as a case study, but going through a number of different sites and also giving a historical background, looking at the UK as well as the US. So it's going to be an insightful and informative event and discussion not to be missed. So hopefully we can see you there. Thank you all for your time, your talent, and your attention. Have a lovely evening. Thank you and goodbye.